Good morning and welcome to the Daily Cyber Briefing for Monday, the 11th of November. It's Armistice Day. I'm Stephen Ridgway. Cyber criminals are using Excel, an Excel exploit, to spread fileless remote REMCOS rat malware. Oh Lord, what a title that one is. So basically, something to be aware of. So REMCOS, I'm not going to talk about how REMCOS works because we've spoken about this before. However, there has been a noticeable increase in the amount of malware that is being distributed via phishing again, of course, that is exploiting a rather old vulnerability in Office, CVE 2017-0199, with a CVSS score of 7.8. Downloads an HTML application file from a specific remote server and then launches it using mshta.exe. There is a nice flowchart that sets out the various steps in this particular article from the Hacker News, which we will link to the briefing if you are interested in having a look at this. But basically, phishing email contains Excel spreadsheet, exploits vulnerability CVE 2017-0199. HTA file is downloaded, executes multiple scripts, including VBS, JavaScript, PowerShell, downloads DLL host, which loads and runs malicious code in PowerShell. So this particular piece of malware has reasonably sophisticated anti-analysis, process hollowing type stuff, and it runs in memory, or it ends up with running REMCOS in memory. Being in memory, of course, means firstly it's not mainly it's not as easy to detect because it's not sat on a disk somewhere, and it is harder to identify malware running in memory without having an associated file. So definitely one to be aware of. I would suggest that the simplest way to mitigate the risk of being hit by this is to ensure that you are not running a version of Office which is vulnerable to CVE 2017-0199. So Mazda, oh dear, Mazda Connect flaws allow vehicles to be hacked. So this vulnerability or this particular concern has cropped up on various sites over the weekend. There are a string of vulnerabilities in the infotainment unit, known as Mazda Connect, that could allow attackers to execute arbitrary code with root access in your car. Requires physical access in order to exploit these vulnerabilities, and these vulnerabilities are found in some Mazda cars from 2014 up to about 2021, so relatively recent, but perhaps not the most recent Mazda cars there. There are 6 vulnerabilities. I'm not going to read you a list of numbers, but they result in they're vulnerabilities in things like SQL injection, command injection vulnerabilities, lack of controls over root trusts, unsigned code vulnerabilities. So relatively straightforward to understand vulnerabilities. The risk is that anybody with physical access to your car that can plug in a USB device can potentially exploit vulnerabilities in this car. So, what can they do? Well, at its simplest level, they could brick the infotainment system. At its more worrying level, there may well be access to things that could have safety concerns. I think anything changing software on your car has got to be, any malicious activity changing software on your car has got to be worrying at some level or another. And in physical access, we think, well, okay, that doesn't matter then because nobody's got physical access to my car. Well, you've got to bear in mind that, what about valeting or car washes? What about when your car's in for a service? So yes, there is an explicit amount of trust that you have in people that you do hand your keys over to. And that's before you get to the. It's actually not that difficult to get access to a car anyway these days. People plugging in iPods or iPhones, mass storage devices, whatever it may be. So it may not even be directly that you're directly interacting with the attacker. It could well be that somebody else's device, a friend's device, has been compromised. Oh dear, loads of this stuff. Anyway, the unit that is vulnerable was manufactured by Visteon and has software developed by Johnson Controls Inc. JCI. The latest software version, 7.4.00.324A, I believe is in fact vulnerable, but experts believe that versions at least back to 7.0.x may also be vulnerable. So if you are driving a Mazda and you are of that age and you are in any way concerned about this stuff, I would say initial defense would be very careful about who you give your keys to. There isn't much else to do. I don't believe that there is a patch available yet. One is hoping that a patch will be made available ASAP for this. But again, given the nature of this stuff, I don't believe that you can update over the air rather. I think it has to be a physical update. So you may well need to drop into your Mazda dealer to get this stuff done if there isn't a way of doing the update yourself. And then something else that I have seen which has hit the cyber news in a big way over the last few days is the use of concatenated zip files to avoid detection of malware. So how does this work? Well, at its simplest, create two zip files. First zip file contains something innocuous, something pretty harmless, potentially interesting, invoice, whatever, blah, 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 usual sort of phishing stuff. Second zip file contains malware. And you then concatenate them. And what I mean by that is you don't add a zip file to a zip file. What you do is at a binary level, kind of append the second zip file to the first zip file so that they all appear to be one file. Now, depending on the archiving software that the victim uses, this may show up in various different ways. One potential way is that the initial, like the zip file, the original zip file 1, contents are shown, you may get a warning saying there is other data, depending. It's the sort of pop-up that you would just go, yeah, there is other data. Yeah, all right, big deal. Okay, carry on. But the archive program will then continue and execute it, unzip it effectively. You may find that you're shown the data in both zip files. Or you may even find the other way around, that the malware gets presented to you, but the original file doesn't. So there's, depending on what the unzip program is, WinRAR or whatever it may be, Zip itself, WinZip, you get different results. Bearing in mind also, Windows File Explorer can look inside zip files. So there is, at least on a majority of devices out there, something which will look into these things. There is so the article in Bleeping Computer explains in more detail how this works, but effectively, because you've got two zip files within one file on disk, you've got the ability to obfuscate or hide malware that will potentially pass scans from endpoint protection solutions and so on and so forth. It is a technique that is worth being aware of because, as I said before, as soon as things hit the sort of mainstream cyber news, they are brought to the attention of people who will then go and play with this stuff, or potentially use it to learn how to do things that they wouldn't have been able to do before. So definitely worth having a look at this. Definitely worth having a read up on it, and it is also worth understanding whether the endpoint protection solution that you're using is capable of dealing with these sorts of situations proactively until the malware has been unpacked and is running on the endpoint itself. Right, well, that's all from me for today. Hope you have a good